All right. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of great millstone that taught us this truth. And salutations to the hopeful elect that's around the four corners of the globe. And the elect begins with the 144,000. Yahweh, who the world ignorantly calls God and Jehovah. BAHASHAM is in the name. YAHAWASHI, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. The Rakakwadash cheers the Holy Spirit. I'm the brother I will with the JMS Chicago camp out here in Chicago. Come back at you brothers and sisters of the household of faith of the hopeful righteous elect with another lesson. And Lord willing, I hope this lesson be edifying through the spirit and power of YAHAWASHI. Once again, I hope this lesson is edifying. I'm just simply entitled to this lesson, hey, came in bitterly, going to go out bitterly. Talking about America, man. Because how did this place, ultimately start, man? About ultimately what? By the rape, robbery, and murder of the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Because here you have it. Hey, it's the 4th of July, man. In 1776, when America ultimately became established, man. It started off as 13 colonies, man. Then ultimately, eventually, you have the 50 United States, man. But ultimately, how was this place ultimately formed, man? By ultimately what? Esau Edom coming over here, rape, robbing, and murder in the Northern Kingdom. And then ultimately, enslaved, the Southern Kingdom, both Southern and Northern Kingdom, ultimately had them built up America, man. Through rape, robbery, and murder was this place ultimately built. And this place was built bitterly, man, by ultimately what? By our blood being spilled. But how is this place ultimately going to go out, man? By thermonuclear destruction, man. But this is the book of Psalms 137 and verse 7. Remember, O Lord Yahweh, the children of Edom, in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, right? Destroy it, even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that reward of thee as thou hast served us. And right, because it talks about in Revelations, what I'm going to get, it says reward unto her double, man. How ultimately did this place reward us, man, by rape, robbery, and murder, man? You just read the history of the transatlantic slave trade, man. Our people, the poor conditions while people was working on the cotton fields, man. Our families being split up. We being lynched on these different trees and light poles and things like that, man. Butt breaking. And ultimately what? We was forced, by, hardcore labor. We had to build up this man's society, man, by hardcore slavery, through much oppression. We had to build up this man's society, man. It says, happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. All right, that's what he ultimately did to our children, man. And us being in captivity here in America, we built up this man's society. This place has physically destroyed us, mentally destroyed us, man, spiritually destroyed us. So ultimately, how is this place going to be rewarded, man? By the way of thermonuclear fire, man. But let's grab this real quick. But with the sword, this devil ultimately inquired, these different land masses in America being, the top, the top of his headquarters, man, where he used, the sword to ultimately to take this land over from the Northern Kingdom. But this is the book of Micah 2:1. Woe to them that advise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand, right? So you have the elites behind the scenes, ultimately what? Conjuring up, different plans, different schemes to ultimately keep our people oppressed, keep our people down. Ultimately, observing different type of wickedness, to keep our people down, keep our people in that slumbered state, man. This is what they be talking about behind the scenes, man. Verse 2, it says, and they cover fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage, right? Take them by violence, man, because we know, going back to what's that, Genesis, the 27th chapter, you had Isaac, which is, YAHAWASHI, you had Isaac that ultimately what? Blessed Esau Edom, with the sword, man. And ultimately what? With the sword, he was able to go throughout these different land masses and take it over by what? Brute force, man. The Gatling, you have different things like the Gatling gun, these different tanks, his biological warfare, using certain, weaponizing different diseases, to inquire these different land masses that he takes from the different inhabitants, man. And America being, one of them, man. America being his, his main headquarters, man. Babylon the Great. Read that again. Verse 2, it says, and they cover fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage, right? So what did Esau Edom do when he came over here? He ultimately what? He made, Gad made different treaties with this devil. And ultimately what? This devil broke every single one, man. And ultimately what? Because the scripture says in Psalms, his words were smoother than butter, but what was in his heart? He got Gad and Reuben in the Northern Kingdom in a comfortable place. And what did he do? He ultimately ended up drawing his sword, man. ultimately what? Taking the different land masses from Gad and Reuben, man. Ultimately, slaughtering the inhabitants of this land, man. You had Issachar that ultimately owned, California, Texas, the western portion of America. And ultimately, what did Esau Edom do? Biological warfare, his sword, the gun. Ultimately, what? Killing our people, destroying our people, taking our people off the land. You had the Trail of Tears, man. That's how America was established over time, man, by rape, robbery, and murder, man. But let's continue. This is the book of Revelation 6 and 4. It says, and there went out another horse that was red, right? Genesis, the 25th chapter. It talks about what? The first came out red all over like a hairy garment. And the power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword, right? As I mentioned in Genesis, the 27th chapter, you had Isaac ultimately bless Esau, with what? The sword, man. And with the sword, he's able to what? He's able to weaponize diseases. He's able to formulate anything into a weapon and ultimately use it against the people. And that's what he did to our people, man. He destroyed our people, destroys the minds of our people, man. Weaponizes different diseases. Hey, smallpox was a big one when he came over here to the soils of America. He ultimately gave the Native Americans, which comes from the tribe of Gad, smallpox, man. And ultimately this is what this devil does, man. Weaponizing, different things to ultimately to use against our people. And Salakia, for the background, you have this whole 4th of July thing going on, so they firing fireworks. But it says that was given unto him a great sword. And you continue to read down in this verse, which I'm going to do. Let's see. Because it talks about, this devil taking peace from the earth, man. Yep, verse 8. It says, and I looked. Yep, and I looked and beheld a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the four part of the earth. And right. And what is that four part of the earth? America, man. Because also this place is called what? The uttermost part of the earth. Because it talks about that in the Gospels. We shall teach again in the uttermost parts of the earth. That's over here in America. Hey, Job 9:24 says what? The earth was given into the hands of the wicked, man. It says, and power was given unto them over the four part of the earth to kill with the sword and with hunger and with death and with the beasts of the earth. And how is he able to do this? And he's going to do it again, man, on a larger scale. Hey, when Jacob's trouble, arises, man, which we're in the beginning of Jacob's trouble. But how was he able, to take the soils of America, man, in these different land masses, man, by the way of the sword, man? Going back to Genesis, the 27th chapter, as I quoted, man. He was ultimately blessed with the sword to do these things, man. And ultimately, that's how America was established, through rape, through robbery, through murder, man. And ultimately, he had our people, after he, put our people in subjection, he made our people build up his kingdom, man. This is the book of Ezekiel 35 and 5, but hey, it's a recompense for that, man. Something we was going over at camp today, man. It's a recompense for that, man. We see Esau's kingdom falling brick by brick, economically. So these said things are happening right before our eyes. But this is the book of Ezekiel 35 and verse 5. I'm going to start at verse 1. I'm going to read down. Ezekiel 35 and 1. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir and prophesy against it. And ultimately what? When Abba Bivens came on the scene, when his word began to be preached, it ultimately marked the end of Esau's kingdom, man. His kingdom, ever since then, his word being preached, his kingdom has been on a constant decline, man. And say unto it, thus saith the Lord Yahawah, behold, out Mount Seir, I am against thee, and I will stretch out my hand against thee, and I will make thee most desolate. Right, that's soon to happen, man. The Lord is going to ultimately lay low this man's kingdom, man. He's going to serve his 1,000 years of captivity, and he's ultimately going to be eradicated off the earth. You can read that in Obadiah 1 and 18. What's that? Job 20 and verse 5. Job 18. Because ultimately after he served his 1,000 years of captivity, because it's going to begin what? The Lord taking his kingdom away from him, man. Through the rape, robbery, and murder, he ultimately put the Israelites through over the course of us being here, man. The Lord is going to destroy this man's kingdom by the way of thermonuclear fire, take this man down into captivity for 1,000 years, and ultimately what is going to, end up with the eradication of the Edomite race, man. Verse 4 says, I will lay the cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate, And thou shalt know that I am the Lord Yahawah, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel, right? Even to this day, he is shedding our blood, man, by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, and that the time of their iniquity had an end. All right, just look at slavery, man, hardcore slavery, man. I thought people got into slavery, hardcore slavery. What was, set up against our people? You had Jim Crow. You have these different sundown towns that still exist to this very day, man. You're still finding Jake hung onto a tree unto this very day. So ultimately, what? Us coming out of hardcore slavery, Jake has been going through it ever since, man. Hey, really ever since, Jake had touched the soils of America, man. Starting with the Northern Kingdom, man. Ultimately, being raped, robbed, and murdered by the Spaniards. You had Christopher Colon that came over here. Ultimately, what? Just look what he did to the Taino Indians over there in the Caribbean, man. Rape, robbery, and murder. I'm reading the book, The Delectable Negro. I had to get back into it. But ultimately, what? Cannibalism. Esau Edom was cannibalizing Jake. It's a lot of things we don't even know about. The things we do know, but it's a lot more things we don't even know about that these devils has done to our people on the soils of America, man. It says, verse 6, it says, therefore, as I live, saith the Lord Yahawah, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Says, thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. So ultimately, what? It's going to return upon their own head, man. Because what's that? Numbers 35 and 33. The blood cannot be cleansed, only by the ones that ultimately, loosely paraphrasing, Lord will I can grab it. But ultimately, they shed our blood, but we're going to shed their blood, man. For what they did to our people. But let me actually see, can I actually grab that real quick. This is the book of Numbers 35 and 33. So ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. Right? Because you're going to ultimately what? Ultimately, how was our blood shed? Hey, through rape, robbery, and murder. Esau Edom using a sword, killing our people indiscriminately, man. Because it talks about, he shall not show favor to the old nor the young, man. Killing our children, butt breaking our men, cutting the fetuses out of our women's stomach. Hey, so ultimately what? These said things have to be repaid, man. And we're seeing it right before our eyes, man. The Lord is dismantling this man kingdom, man. That's how this place came in bitterly, man. Everything I'm reading, that's how this place came in bitterly. America was established off what? Rape, robbery, and murder. Off the backs of our ancestors, man. We are our ancestors. We are our forefathers coming back. So ultimately what? The Lord is going to pay these devils back for that, man. But this is the book of Revelations 18 and 1. And this place is going to go out bitterly. Let's read it. Revelations 18 and 1. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the whole of every foul spirit, and in a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Right? It says that great city is fallen, man. Talking about America, man. Because we know America is going to be destroyed by ICBM missiles, man. Because it talks about in Jeremiah how ultimately all these different nations are going to, aim their missiles at America and ultimately what? Strike America, man. Verse 3 says, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. You had America, in bed with all these different nations, ultimately feeding off America's philosophies, man. That's why a lot of these other nations are destroyed, man. Verse 4 says, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Right? We're supposed to come out this place spiritually, man. We're not supposed to, be hand in hand with this place, but we're supposed to come out this place spiritually, and ultimately what? Lean upon YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI. It says that you receive not of her place. What's the main plague that's going to strike this place, man? Hey, that fire, those thermonuclear missiles. Because Malachi 4 says what? The day cometh, thou shalt burn as an oven, man. Hey, that's how America's going to go out, man. It's going to go out bitterly, because that's what America ultimately means. It means bitter, man. And ultimately what? This place is very bitter, man. Verse 5, it says, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and YAHAWAH have remember her iniquities. Right? Her sins reach unto heaven. Just look at what this place, did to the Israelites, man. What this place, the type of wickedness that this place promotes, man. And ultimately what? The Lord is going to deal with this place, man. Because ultimately what? The sins have ultimately reached what? The highest, man. Yahawah, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, man. You know, it says, and Yahawah have remembered her iniquities, right? What they did to the Israelites, what this devil did to the Israelites on the shores of America. So ultimately, everything we seeing with the collapse of America and these said things happening in prophecy, man, it's Yahawah, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI visiting this place, man. Verse 6, it says, reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works, and the cup which she had filled to her double. And right, how did this place reward us, man? As I mentioned, man, rape, robbery, and murder, man. You know, ultimately what? Esau, splitting up our families, butt breaking the men, cannibalizing our people, man. Hey, turning our people into furniture, using Jake's flesh, to turn, to make, certain pieces of furniture, man. This is history that you can look up, man. This is how this place rewarded us. But it says what? It says, and double unto her, double according to her works, and the cup which she had filled to her double. Right. So ultimately what? This place is going to be rewarded double. These devils are going to be rewarded double, man. Ultimately what? Through rape, robbery, and murder, man. Ultimately what they did to us is going to come back unto them, man. Verse 7, it says, how much she have glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her, for she said in her heart, I sit a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow, right? Because ultimately America has not been touched, by a big war. This place haven't been invaded, but ultimately that's about to change, man. With this third world war, you're going to have these different nations ultimately aim their missiles at America and ultimately destroy this place, man. Verse 8, it says, therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord Yahawah who judgeth her. And right, that's America's ultimately what? Destination, final destination, man. Hey, thermonuclear destruction. Hey, this place came in bitterly by what? The rape, robbery, and murder of the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. We had to build up this place, through tears, through sorrow. And ultimately, how's this place going to go out, man? Hey, through by fire. And it talks about in 1 hour. Let's actually grab this in the same chapter. Yep, verse 10. Start at verse 9. Jump down to verse 9. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. Because it talks about that this place is going to be burning from generation to generation. After that fire dies down, this place is going to be a big desert. Verse 10, I think it talks about that in Isaiah. Verse 10, it says, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. So it's going to take the Lord 1 hour to ultimately what? To eradicate this place. By the way of what? That thermonuclear destruction, man. But let's actually grab this. Revelation 17 and 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, right? America's on our last, man. You have the European Union. You got NATO. It says, these shall hate the whore and shall make her desolate and naked and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Because it's ultimately going to come a point well, America's on our last what? It's going to ally with Russia, and everybody's ultimately going to be against this place, Babylon the Great, man, which is America, man. And everybody, hey, these different countries that once allied with America is going to shoot their missiles upon America, man. And this is what we're gearing up towards right now, man, because the America's own allies is already looking at this place sideways because what this guy DJT is doing, man, he's making moves that's ultimately putting his own allies at odds, man. Basically, he's destroying that relationship between America and these other countries, man. So ultimately, hey, what does Bible prophecy say? That ultimately America's own allies is going to turn their missiles upon this place and destroy this place, man. And this is how this place is going to go out bitterly, man, by that fire. But let's actually grab this. Nahum 1 and 9. What do you imagine against the Lord Yahawah? He will make an utter end, right? He's going to make an utter end in this place, Babylon, the great America. Affliction shall not rise up the second time. And right, after all this place has did to our people, the rape, robbery, and murder. This is the last time we're going to go through captivity, man. And this is it. And the Lord is going to make an example of America, what he did, for what this place did to his chosen people, man. The apple of his eye. This place is going to be, ultimately a desert, man. So this place is going to go out. This place is going to have a bitter end. This place came in bitterly. It's going to go out bitterly, man. And it's America's 250th birthday, man. And ultimately, ever since this place has been, in power, ever since Esau been in power, you have America. This place has been nothing but destructive, man. you know, to our people and to the rest of the world. So the Lord is coming back to what? To destroy this place, man. So with that being said, I hope this lesson was edifying. I want to end up again all praise, honor, and glory to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of great millstone taught us the truth, and salutations to the hopeful elect that's around the four corners of the globe. Lord, and I hope this lesson was edifying. Until next time, Kwam Yasharella, Shalom, and Abba Babal. Until next time, Lord willing.